He sat down on American television, on NBC's Meet the Press, on camera, in front of the moderator, and Iran's foreign minister said it directly. There needs to be a permanent end to the war. Unless we get to that, I think we need to continue fighting for the sake of our people and our security. Not a ceasefire, not a pause, not a temporary halt, a permanent end, or nothing. That is Iran's publicly stated negotiating position, delivered live in English to an American television audience on the same day that Trump told NBC News in a separate interview that he does not want to make a deal because the terms are not good enough yet. Iran wants to make a deal, and I don't want to make it because the terms aren't good enough yet, Trump said. Iran says it needs a permanent end, or it keeps fighting. Trump says the terms aren't good enough yet. Two governments, two positions. Both stated publicly, both leaving no visible space between them for the war to end. And on the same day those two statements were made, Trump raised a question on air about whether Iran's new supreme leader is even alive. I don't know if he's even alive. So far, nobody's been able to show him, Trump told NBC News during a phone interview. He added, I'm hearing he's not alive, and if he is, he should do something very smart for his country, and that's surrender. Then he described it as a rumor. The President of the United States, on a phone interview with NBC News, describing reports of the Iranian supreme leader's death as something he is hearing, and calling it a rumor in the same sentence. That is day 15 of Operation Epic Fury, and that is the opening of this script. Let's go back to Abbas Araghchi's Meet the Press appearance and lay out everything he said, because it is one of the most significant pieces of diplomatic communication in this conflict. And it was said on American television, to an American audience. The US and Israel are killing our people. They are killing girl students, They are attacking hospitals, Araghchi told moderator Kristen Welker, according to NBC News. He referenced the ceasefire reached to end last year's 12-day war. He said the US and Israel had already shattered that ceasefire. And now you want to ask for a ceasefire again? This doesn't work like this, he said. His specific framing of what Iran needs is precise and worth quoting carefully. There needs to be a permanent end to the war. Unless we get to that, I think we need to continue fighting for the sake of our people and our security. Permanent end. Not temporary cessation, not a monitored pause with verification mechanisms. A permanent end to the war. The distinction matters enormously. A ceasefire is a temporary halt to fighting, typically followed by negotiations. A permanent end to the war implies final resolution of all underlying disputes before Iran stops fighting. Those are not the same thing. And Iran's foreign minister is telling NBC's audience that Iran will not accept the first one. It is demanding the second. Now let's put Russia on the table, because the Russia question on Meet the Press produced one of the most significant admissions of the entire conflict. Welker pressed Araghchi directly, is Iran receiving Russian support? His answer, as reported by NBC News, cooperation between Iran and Russia is not something new. It's not a secret. He then added, they are helping us in many different directions. I don't have any detailed information. They are helping us in many different directions. Iran's foreign minister confirming Russian assistance to Iran on American television. NBC News had separately reported, citing 4 sources, that Russia was providing intelligence to Iran on the location of U.S. forces in the Middle East, including intelligence that could help Iran locate American warships. That report was published on Friday, the day before the Meet the Press interview. Araghchi did not confirm or deny whether Russian intelligence was specifically helping Iran locate U.S. warships. He said he did not have detailed information, but he confirmed the assistance broadly, helping in many different directions. UN Ambassador Mike Waltz appeared on the same program, according to NBC News, and addressed the Russia question directly. We know that both Russia and Iran have had this symbiotic relationship, Waltz said. He then downplayed the effectiveness of whatever Russia is providing. If they are providing anything, it certainly hasn't been very effective, because the U.S. military is decimating Iran's air force, air defenses, navy, ground forces, command and control, Waltz said. So whatever they're providing, if they're providing anything, hasn't shown to help them very much. 2 responses. Araghchi. Yes, they are helping in many directions. Waltz. If they are helping, it is not working. The first is a confirmation. The second is an assessment of effectiveness. They are not mutually exclusive. Russia can be providing intelligence to Iran, while the overall U.S.-Israeli military campaign is simultaneously degrading Iran's military capabilities. Both things can be true at the same time. Let's go to Trump's separate NBC interview on Saturday, because it produced multiple statements that deserve careful, precise treatment. Trump told NBC News he is not prepared to make a deal with Iran. Iran wants to make a deal, and I don't want to make it because the terms aren't good enough yet, he said. The reporter asked him what terms would be acceptable. Well, I don't want to say that to you, Trump responded. He declined to specify. He acknowledged Iran wants a deal. He said the terms are not good enough. He would not describe what terms would be. On the subject of Iran's new supreme leader, Trump raised doubts about whether Mojtaba Khamenei is alive. "I don't know if he's even alive. So far, nobody's been able to show him," Trump said. He then added, "I'm hearing he's not alive, and if he is, he should do something very smart for his country, and that's surrender." Then he called it a rumor. Let's examine that sequence precisely. He says he does not know if Khamenei is alive. He says he is hearing reports of his death. He says those reports are a rumor. He says if Khamenei is alive, he should surrender. That is 4 things said about the same subject in a few sentences that do not form a consistent position. It is worth noting what the sourced reporting from earlier in this series confirmed. A source familiar with the situation told CNN that Khamenei suffered a fractured foot, a bruise around his left eye, and minor lacerations to his face on day 1. Iran's own ambassador to Cyprus confirmed the injuries to The Guardian. Iran's foreign minister on Saturday said, "There is no problem with the new supreme leader. He is performing his duties according to the constitution, and he will continue to do that." Iran's foreign minister's denial is his claim. The earlier confirmed injury reports are confirmed by separate sourcing. Trump's rumor of death is his statement. None of these resolve into a single confirmed picture. What is confirmed is that Khamenei has not appeared in public video since his appointment. Now let's look at what Trump and Araghchi said about the fundamental justification for the war, because the 2 men gave directly contradictory accounts of why it started on Meet the Press. Trump said in an earlier week's statements, as reported by NBC, that one reason for launching the war was that Iran would soon have missiles capable of reaching the United States. Araghchi was asked about this directly. "This is in fact misinformation," he said. He then made a specific claim about Iran's missile program. "You know, we have capability to produce missiles, but we have intentionally limited ourselves to below 2,000 kilometers of range because we don't want to be felt as a threat by anybody else in the world." Below 2,000 kilometers of range, a self-imposed limit, stated on American television by Iran's foreign minister. That claim is Iran's stated position. It is not independently verified in the documents reviewed, but it is on the public record, and it directly contradicts one of the stated rationales for the war as Trump described it. Trump's rationale: Iran would soon have missiles capable of reaching the U.S. Araghchi's response: Iran has intentionally limited its missiles to below 2,000 kilometer range. Both cannot be true simultaneously. And the truth of that specific dispute shapes the historical justification for a war that has now cost, by the Pentagon's own briefing, at least $11.3 billion in its first 6 days. There's a third position on the war's justification that came from UN Ambassador Waltz on the same program, and it is different from Trump's missile range explanation. Waltz said what the U.S. ultimately wants is pretty much common sense. As he said, we have to have an Iranian government that no longer threatens the American people, threatens our allies, and threatens the world, and holds the world's energy supplies hostage through both its missiles and its navy. Waltz told Meet the Press, according to NBC, an Iranian government that no longer threatens. That is a broader objective than destroying specific military capabilities. It describes a desired change in the character of Iran's government. Trump on Truth Social had posted that the U.S. would not make a deal with Iran except unconditional surrender. Unconditional surrender. Waltz said he would leave the definition of that to Trump as commander-in-chief. We're ahead of schedule, and what he ultimately wants is pretty much common sense, Waltz said. Unconditional surrender. Ahead of schedule, common sense, and Trump telling NBC he will not make a deal because terms are not good enough yet, while not specifying what terms would be. Let's now bring in the Iranian president's statement on Saturday, because it represents an attempt by Iran to draw a distinction between its attacks on Gulf states and its stated intent. On Saturday, according to NBC News, Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian said Iran would no longer attack neighboring Gulf nations unless they facilitate U.S. or Israeli attacks. He also apologized. He apologized to the region after Iranian strikes killed people in Kuwait, the United Arab Emirates, and Oman. That is Iran's president formally apologizing for deaths caused by Iranian strikes on neighboring countries. But Araghchi then explained Iran's framing of those attacks on Meet the Press. "We are not attacking our neighbors intentionally," he said. "We are attacking American bases, American installations, American assets, which are unfortunately located in the soils of our neighbors," he told Welker. American assets, located on the soil of neighbors. That framing, the attacks are aimed at American targets, not at the host countries, is Iran's stated strategic narrative. It places the responsibility for damage in Gulf countries on the decision by those countries to host American military forces. The UAE's senior diplomatic advisor, Anwar Gargash, responded to Iran's framing of the UAE specifically. His response, reported by CNN, was direct. Araghchi's comments accusing the Emirates of aggression against Iran are part of a confused policy that has misdirected its aim, lost its compass, and forsaken wisdom, Gargash wrote on X. He said Araghchi had condemned his own country and entrenched its isolation. He noted the UAE had made sincere efforts to mediate before the war started. And he said, the UAE has the right to self-defense in the face of this terrorist aggression. Iran says it is attacking American assets on Gulf soil. The UAE says it has the right to defend itself from what it calls terrorist aggression. And Iran's president apologized for the deaths, while Iran's foreign minister explained why the attacks were justified, both simultaneously. Let's now look at the ground troops question, because Araghchi addressed it directly on Meet the Press, and the statement he made is precise and significant. He was asked, what happens if the U.S. deploys ground troops to Iran? We have very brave soldiers who are waiting for any enemy who enters into our soil, to fight with them and to kill them and destroy them, Araghchi said. That is Iran's official, public, on-record position on U.S. ground deployment to Iran. Fight them, kill them, and destroy them. That position is stated on American television by Iran's foreign minister during an interview on Meet the Press. Now let's place it alongside the Al Jazeera reporting on U.S. military deployments. According to Al Jazeera, citing U.S. Army Secretary Dan Driscoll, the U.S. is deploying 10,000 interceptor drones to the Middle East. Additionally, U.S. media reports cited by Al Jazeera indicate the potential deployment of the USS Tripoli, an amphibious assault ship, alongside 2,500 Marines reportedly approved by Defense Secretary Hegseth. The USS Tripoli is an amphibious assault ship. Amphibious assault ships are designed to project ground combat power from the sea. Marines deploying from an amphibious assault ship are not a strategic reserve. They are a power projection capability that can, if ordered, land forces on a coast. Iran's coast, or the coast of any country in the region. Araghchi said if ground troops enter Iranian soil, Iran will fight them and kill them. The U.S. is deploying an amphibious assault ship with 2,500 Marines, according to Al Jazeera. CNN confirmed through 3 officials the deployment of a Marine Expeditionary Unit. No official has said those Marines will land in Iran, but the capability is being positioned, and Iran's foreign minister has stated its response on camera. Let's talk about Hegseth's language on day 15, because Al Jazeera reported a specific statement from the defense secretary that drew a public response from a Democratic member of Congress. Hegseth stated, according to Al Jazeera, that the U.S. military will show no quarter, no mercy for our enemy. No quarter, no mercy. Democratic Congressman Eugene Vindman raised concerns about that statement publicly, according to Al Jazeera, citing possible illegal orders. No quarter is a phrase with specific legal meaning in the laws of armed conflict. Giving no quarter means refusing to accept the surrender of enemy combatants. Under international humanitarian law, ordering that no quarter be given is prohibited. The U.S. military's own law of war manual recognizes this. Vindman raised this concern publicly. Hegseth made the statement publicly. The legal question is now part of the public record of this war. Whether the statement constitutes an actual illegal order or rhetorical language about combat intensity is a question the documents do not answer. What they confirm is that the defense secretary said it, a Democratic congressman raised the legal concern publicly, and both are on record. Now let's go to the UAE diplomatic response to Iran's Karg retaliation threat, because it adds a layer to the economic story that connects Iran's military threats directly to specific global businesses. Iran's Revolutionary Guard issued a warning on Saturday urging the United States to move American industrial plants out of the region, according to CNN. The IRGC told civilians to evacuate areas close to facilities in which Americans are shareholders, not just American military bases, not just government facilities, facilities in which Americans are shareholders. That is a threat against privately owned commercial infrastructure. Iran's Foreign Minister Araghchi made the same point in his CNN interview, saying Iran's armed forces will strike any energy infrastructure tied to American companies in the region. Tied to American companies. ExxonMobil has interests in Gulf energy. Chevron has interests in Gulf energy. Halliburton operates across the region. Total, which has American investment, operates across the region. The IRGC's warning and Araghchi's parallel threat are not narrowly targeted at government-owned facilities. They are directed at the commercial presence of American capital in Middle Eastern energy infrastructure, and Iran told civilians to evacuate areas near those facilities. That evacuation warning is simultaneously a threat to the facilities and an assertion that Iran will use those facilities as targets. 3 specific UAE ports were named in the warning: Jebel Ali, Khalifa Port, and Mina al-Fujairah. CNN reported that a fire broke out at the port of Fujairah on Saturday when debris from an intercepted drone fell there. Oil loading operations suspended. The warning was issued. The fire happened on the same day. Let's look at the diplomatic picture, specifically on the straight coalition question. Because after Trump's Truth Social post claiming many countries would send warships, the actual responses from those countries are the relevant facts. China. A spokesperson for the Chinese embassy in Washington told CNN that China calls for an immediate cessation of hostilities and that all parties have the responsibility to ensure stable and unimpeded energy supply. The spokesperson did not confirm whether China is deploying naval assets. China described itself as a sincere friend and strategic partner of Middle Eastern countries, and said it would play a constructive role for de-escalation and restoration of peace. United Kingdom. The UK Ministry of Defence told CNN it is currently discussing with our allies and partners a range of options to ensure the security of shipping in the region. No deployment confirmed. France. French President Macron had previously said France supports a coalition of naval ships but emphasized the need for organization, which may take several weeks. UK Defence Secretary John Healey said, according to CNN, that conversations about the strait were in preliminary stages, while stressing the need to de-escalate beforehand. None confirmed, all of them talking, discussing, considering. Several weeks away at best. Trump wrote, hopefully China, France, Japan, South Korea, the UK, and others. Hopefully. That word is doing a lot of work in a situation where Brent crude is above $100. 17 on vessels have been attacked, and the world's largest container shipping companies have diverted away from the region entirely. Let's go back to Araghchi's nuclear comments on CNN Saturday. Because he said something specific about pre-war negotiations that belongs on the record and has not received sufficient coverage. He denied ever threatening to weaponize Iran's enriched uranium stockpile, saying he was trying to convey the scale of potential concessions Iran was prepared to make. And then he said, we were close to reach a deal. That is the reality. We were close to reaching a deal. That is the Iranian foreign minister's characterization of where negotiations stood before February 28th. He said, this is an imposed war against us. We didn't start this war. We are only defending ourselves. Now let's place his claim against the public record on the U.S. side. Trump told CBS News in the Day 11 reporting, we gave the Iranian regime a year to negotiate, but they insisted on their nuclear program. Iran's foreign minister, we were close to a deal. Trump, they insisted on their nuclear program. Two framings of the same pre-war period. They cannot both be fully accurate, but both are publicly stated, and the gap between them is not just historical dispute. It is the diplomatic landscape of the war's eventual end. If Iran was genuinely close to a deal, there may be negotiable terms. If Iran was insisting on its nuclear program and no deal was close, the gap is wider. Neither side is providing the documentary evidence that would settle the question. Let's look at what the anti-regime protests in Washington on Saturday represent, because CNN reported a rally of Iranian diaspora members in front of the White House on day 15. Anti-regime protesters came to Washington to voice support for Trump's strikes on Iran. Several protesters who said they had previously lived in Iran told CNN they see Trump's operation as an opportunity to help topple the Islamic Republic that has ruled since 1979. One protester, Cyrus Kean, who said he spent the first 25 years of his life in Iran, told CNN, the Iranian people will finish this regime if Trump continues to put the pressure from the skies. Another protester, Reza Mousavi, a volunteer for DC protests for Iran, said Trump had made a promise and stood by it. Many protesters held combined American-Iranian flags. Some wore red Make Iran Great Again hats. Many voiced support for Reza Pahlavi, the exiled son of Iran's last Shah, as a potential future leader. One protester, Marzieh Mirza Salehi, who said she left Iran in 2007, told CNN, we want our Shah coming back to Iran because he's the only one who can help build and make Iran great again. That rally, Iranian diaspora members in Washington supporting American strikes on their country of origin, is a specific and documented part of the domestic political picture on day 15. It is one piece of the public response. A Reuters Ipsos poll referenced in earlier reporting showed 27% of Americans approving of the strikes and 43% disapproving from day 3 of the conflict. The diaspora rally represents a particular segment of American opinion. The broader polling numbers from earlier in this series represent a different picture. Both are documented. Neither cancels the other. Let's now go to the USS Nimitz decision. Because the U.S. Navy made a specific operational decision on Saturday that directly reflects the military pressures this war has created. The USS Nimitz, one of the largest warships in the world, was scheduled to be decommissioned in May 2026, according to CNN. That decommissioning has been postponed. The Navy has extended the ship's service life to March 2027, nearly a year longer than scheduled. USS Nimitz's service life has since been extended to March 2027. Accordingly, the U.S. Navy plans to inactivate the ship in 2027, a U.S. Navy official told CNN. The Nimitz is the oldest American aircraft carrier in active service. It departed its home port in Bremerton, Washington last week. What was planned to be its last trip is now not its last trip. Trump said Friday he believes U.S. Navy escorts for oil tankers through the Strait of Hormuz will happen soon. The Nimitz wrapped a 9-month deployment last December, during which it completed 4 transits of the Strait of Hormuz as part of the U.S. Fifth Fleet, a ship that knows the strait, that completed 4 transits of it. That was weeks from retirement, is now staying in service, because the war that started on February 28th requires naval assets that the current deployment picture cannot fully provide. Let's bring together the full diplomatic contradiction at the center of Day 15. Because it is the most important story this script tells, and it deserves to be stated clearly. Trump says Iran wants a deal, terms not good enough, will not specify what terms would be good enough. Trump says he wants unconditional surrender. Trump says the war is won, needs to be finished. Trump says he does not know if Iran's supreme leader is alive. Araghchi says we need a permanent end to the war, not a ceasefire, or we keep fighting. Araghchi says we were close to a deal before the war. Araghchi says Russia is helping Iran in many directions. Araghchi says Iran is not attacking neighbors, it is attacking American assets on their soil. Araghchi says there is no problem with the new supreme leader. He is performing his duties. Waltz says unconditional surrender means an Iranian government that no longer threatens. Waltz says Russia's assistance, if any, has not been effective. Waltz says whatever Trump ultimately wants is common sense. Every single one of those statements was made publicly, on record, on American television, on Truth Social, in formal press interviews. On the same day that the USS Nimitz had its decommissioning postponed, the USS Tripoli and 2,500 Marines were reportedly approved for deployment by Hegseth. 10,000 interceptor drones are being sent to the region. No country confirmed it would send warships to the strait. Israel completed 400 waves of airstrikes on Iran. On Saturday alone, Israel struck more than 200 targets. Brent crude is above $100. Gas is at $3.68 per gallon in the United States. 3,000 people are confirmed dead across the Middle East. The UN Secretary General was standing in a Beirut, described by CNN as a ghost town, saying, "Stop the fighting." Formula One canceled 2 Grand Prix races. And Trump asked, in a phone interview with NBC News, whether Iran's supreme leader is even alive. Let's close with what Araghchi said at the end of his Meet the Press interview. Because it is the most direct statement of Iran's position from the most senior Iranian official who has appeared publicly on American television during this war. He was pressed on Trump's Truth Social post, calling for Iran's unconditional surrender. He was asked what Iran would do, and he said what he said throughout the interview: a permanent end to the war, not a ceasefire, not a temporary pause, a permanent end. Unless we get to that, I think we need to continue fighting for the sake of our people and our security. And then he said the thing that the headline cannot fully contain. This is an imposed war against us. We didn't start this war. We are only defending ourselves. That is Iran's framing. Imposed. Defensive. Not started by Iran. And Trump's framing is, Iran was the problem. The war was necessary. Unconditional surrender is the goal. Both framings are public. Both are clearly stated. Neither has moved. And between those two positions, permanent end versus unconditional surrender, imposed war versus necessary operation, there is a gap that no diplomat has yet publicly described how to close. Trump says he will know the war is over when he feels it in his bones. Araghchi says Iran will keep fighting until there is a permanent end. 15 days in, more than 3,000 dead, 13 Americans buried. Gas at $3.68, Brent crude above $100. An aircraft carrier pulled back from retirement. Marines heading to the region. The UN Secretary General in Beirut. The Strait of Hormuz under control. And the 2 men who could end this war, or whose governments could, standing on opposite sides of the same television screen. One saying the terms are not good enough. One saying a permanent end or nothing. Day 15. No deal. No ceasefire. No visible path between the two positions. Just the continued fighting that Iran's foreign minister said his country needs, for the sake of its people, until it ends permanently, or doesn't. Let's go deeper on what permanent end to the war actually means as a negotiating demand, because Araghchi used precise language and it deserves precise analysis. A ceasefire is an agreement to stop shooting. It does not resolve the underlying disputes that led to the shooting. It pauses the shooting while those disputes are negotiated. A permanent end to the war implies a final agreement that resolves the underlying disputes. What are the underlying disputes in this case? Iran's nuclear program, Iran's ballistic missile capability, Iran's regional network of allied armed groups, Iran's relationship with Russia, U.S. and Israeli security demands regarding all of the above. Each of those is a dispute with no quick resolution on the table. Iran's enriched uranium stockpile has been estimated at levels that put it close to weapons-grade enrichment. The IAEA, as cited in earlier reporting, confirmed damage to Natanz and Isfahan nuclear facilities. But the IAEA director said the damage appeared minor. The nuclear program, even after 15 days of strikes, has not been eliminated. Iran's ballistic missile volume has been degraded, according to Hegseth, by 90%. But 10% of an enormous missile arsenal is still thousands of missiles. And the IRGC Air Force commander had announced only missiles with warheads heavier than 1 ton going forward. Heavier warheads, with degraded but not destroyed capability. Iran's regional network, Hezbollah, Iraqi militia, Yemeni Houthis, are not military capabilities that can be destroyed from the air. They are political and social networks embedded in their respective societies. 15 days of airstrikes have not dissolved them. And Iran's relationship with Russia is, in Araghchi's own words, a strategic partnership involving active military cooperation in multiple directions. A permanent end to the war that resolves all of those disputes does not happen in a week. It may not happen in a year. And while those disputes remain unresolved, Araghchi told Meet the Press, Iran will keep fighting. That is the strategic reality underneath the diplomatic language. Let's look at what Russia's role means for the timeline of this war. Because Zelensky's confirmation on CNN and Araghchi's confirmation on NBC together paint a picture that is more significant than either statement alone. Zelensky said Russia supplied Iran with drones that have been used against U.S. military bases. Araghchi said Russia is helping Iran in many directions. NBC News reported, citing 4 sources, that Russia was providing intelligence on the location of U.S. forces, including intelligence that could help locate American warships. 3 separate confirmations of Russian involvement from 3 different sources on 2 different networks. Now let's think about what that means for the war's duration. If Iran is receiving intelligence from Russia about American warships and force locations, Iran's ability to target American assets is enhanced beyond what its own intelligence apparatus can produce. Russia has been monitoring American military movements for decades. Its satellite network, its signals intelligence capability, its established intelligence networks across the Middle East are far more developed than Iran's own independent capability. If Russia is feeding targeting data to Iran, the war Iran is fighting against the United States is partially supported by a nuclear power with global intelligence reach. And Ambassador Waltz said on Meet the Press that Russia's assistance, if anything, has not been effective because the U.S. is decimating Iran's capabilities. But effectiveness is measured over time, and the war is 15 days old. What Russia's assistance means at the end of 15 days is different from what it means at the end of 60 or 90. If the war continues, as Araghchi said it will, until a permanent end, and Russia continues to provide what Araghchi says it is providing, help in many directions, the strategic equation of this war is not the one it was when it was sold to the American public as a short-term excursion against a weakened adversary. Let's go to the human toll one more time. Because Day 15 produced a specific and documented set of numbers that should be on the record. CNN estimates more than 3,000 people killed across the Middle East since February 28th. The breakdown by country, as reported by CNN, Iran, the US-based human rights activist news agency reported 1,298 civilians, including 205 children and 1,122 military personnel. Lebanon, at least 826 people killed, including 106 children. Israel, at least 15 Israelis killed since the conflict began. U.S., 13 service members killed total, 7 from hostile fire, 6 in the KC-135 crash. Iraq, at least 32 people killed, including a French soldier. Kuwait, 6 people killed, including an 11-year-old girl from shrapnel on March 4th. UAE, 6 people killed of multiple nationalities. Bahrain, 2 people killed. Oman, 3 people killed, including an Indian national on a tanker and 2 foreign nationals in a drone crash. Saudi Arabia, 2 people killed in a residential facility strike, more than 3,000, across 12 countries and territories in 15 days. Every one of those deaths was a specific person with a name, a family, and a life that ended inside 15 days of a war between governments. The 12-year-old boy injured in Eilat on Saturday by an Iranian missile launch, according to CNN. The 11-year-old Kuwaiti girl killed by shrapnel on March 4th. The 205 Iranian children confirmed dead by Harana. The 106 Lebanese children killed in Israeli strikes. The 12 medical workers killed in a healthcare center in southern Lebanon. The 6 U.S. service members whose KC-135 crashed in western Iraq on Thursday. That is what Day 15 looks like when you remove the strategic frameworks and the press conference language and just count it. Let's now look at what the USS Nimitz decision specifically tells us about the Navy's posture. Because pulling a carrier back from its planned decommissioning date is not a routine administrative adjustment. The USS Nimitz is the oldest American aircraft carrier in active service. It was commissioned in 1975. It has been deployed continuously for over 50 years. The decision to decommission a carrier is made years in advance. It involves extensive planning for the transfer of its air wing, the reassignment of its crew, the scheduling of its nuclear fuel removal, and its eventual disposal. All of that planning had been done for May 2026. Then the Iran war started on February 28th, and now the Nimitz is staying in service until March 2027, nearly a full year extension. That is an emergency decision driven by an operational need that did not exist in the planning cycle that scheduled the Nimitz's retirement. The U.S. Navy did not have a spare carrier on standby. When the war in Iran created demand for additional carrier capacity in the region, the only option was to keep a ship in service that was scheduled to leave it. That is a specific window into the operational strain the war has placed on the U.S. military's most expensive and most strategically significant assets. And it happened on day 15. The oldest carrier in the fleet is staying in service because of a war that Trump described 15 days ago as a short-term excursion. Let's look at what Iran's president said on Saturday, separate from what the foreign minister said, because the two statements together reveal something important about how Iran is managing its regional relationships. Pezeshkian said Iran would no longer attack neighboring Gulf nations unless they facilitate U.S. or Israeli attacks, and he apologized. Those two acts, the commitment not to attack and the apology, are Iran trying to preserve its relationships with Gulf neighbors while continuing the war against U.S. and Israeli assets on their soil. The strategy makes sense on its own terms. Gulf states host American bases. Those bases are Iran's targets. But the Gulf states themselves are not Iran's intended enemies. By apologizing to Kuwait, the UAE, and Oman, Iran is acknowledging that real people in those countries have been killed by Iranian fire. By committing not to attack, unless the host country facilitates U.S.-Israeli attacks, Iran is trying to draw a line between the American military presence and the countries that host it. Iran is essentially saying, we are not at war with you. We are at war with the Americans on your soil. The UAE's response from diplomatic advisor Gargash was to call that framing confused and condemn what it described as terrorist aggression. The Gulf states are not accepting Iran's distinction, but Iran is making the distinction publicly, on the record. While continuing to strike assets, it describes as American. In the territory of countries, it describes as victims rather than adversaries. That is a subtle and specifically calibrated diplomatic position, delivered on the same day that Iran's foreign minister was on Meet the Press. Let's close with the specific diplomatic contradiction that this script opened with, because it is the sentence that defines where this war is. Araghchi said on Meet the Press, unless we get to that, a permanent end, I think we need to continue fighting for the sake of our people and our security. Trump told NBC News, Iran wants to make a deal, and I don't want to make it because the terms aren't good enough yet. Two statements made on the same day on American television. Iran says it needs a permanent end to the war, or it keeps fighting. Trump says he does not want the deal Iran is offering. Both sides are talking. Neither side is talking to the other. Iran is talking to NBC. Trump is talking to NBC. Both are saying the other's position is unacceptable. No mediator is publicly described as carrying a proposal between them. Oman has historically served as a back channel for U.S.-Iran communication. The documents in this series do not show an active Oman channel at this point. China has called for a ceasefire. China's embassy spokesperson declined to confirm whether Chinese warships are being sent to the strait. France has said it wants a coalition but needs several weeks to organize. The UN Secretary General was in Beirut on Saturday saying, stop the fighting. Nobody named a specific path to a deal. And the war, which Trump called a short-term excursion on day 11, is now on day 15, with a carrier pulled from retirement, with Marines heading to the region, with 10,000 interceptor drones being deployed, with gas at 368, with 3,000 confirmed dead, with Iran's foreign minister on American television saying permanent end or fight, and Trump saying the terms are not good enough yet. Not yet. That word yet is the only indication in Trump's statement that a deal is theoretically possible. Yet. Day 15, no deal yet. And Iran's foreign minister already told you what happens until there is. He told you on American television, on Meet the Press, in English, that they will keep fighting for the sake of their people and their security until it is permanently over.